We live in interesting times. Today's stories. Kabul residents fear surge in violent crime. NGO warns against disinformation in Europe. The United Nations says gender diversity is good for businesses and economies. European Union's Timmermans calls for no impunity for priests abusing children. China is opposed to U.S. surveillance blacklist report. Pelosi and Schumer lament President Trump's refusal to work with Democrats on infrastructure deal. Trump holds impromptu news conference after walking out on Democrats. Steven Mnuchin insists he is not violating the law by defying Congress subpoena for Trump tax records. Plus, lessons learned on overseas voting are being addressed by the Philippine Consulate General in Honolulu. Hello everyone, I'm Anna Kui, bringing you stories from around the globe. And this is Eagle News, Washington, D.C. Stressed out Kabul residents say crime is surging in the city, where police are already pushed to their limits, attempting to prevent insurgents' attacks by the Taliban and other groups, including Islamic State.
100% از باید تشویش باشیم. حتی از جان ما تیر هستیم به خاطر از اینکه موتر مردم است. ما مجبور هستیم که در حرکت میریم باید تشویش باشیم که باز جان ما کل چیز امروز هر فرد افغان کل چیزش در خطر است. تنها از ما نه، هر کی که از خانه میبره هر لحظهش در مرگ است، فکر مرگش است که من کجا میمرم، من کجا زنده میمانم.
In central Kabul last month, 2 men stabbed a teenager and left him for dead before escaping on a motorcycle. A brazen attack amid a rising tide of killings and kidnappings as war-scarred residents complain of increasing lawlessness. The brutal mugging happened near the Green Zone, home to many of the Afghan capital's foreign diplomats, but numerous armed guards posted along the street did not try to help the victim, thanks to arcane local liability laws and restrictions. The attackers fled after snatching the boy's mobile phone and camera. He survived, but it took about an hour for authorities to arrive and take him to the hospital. Jan Akan Nawid, spokesman for Afghanistan's Chamber of Commerce, said crime has grown so bad that business people and entrepreneurs were fleeing the country for fear they could be targeted. He said the increase in the crime rate, the killing and kidnapping of businessmen, this has forced many traders to leave the country. Some of them take their families and money to countries such as Turkey and Uzbekistan. The crime in the city has negatively affected investment. Authorities have started to take note. On Saturday, the Interior Ministry sacked Mohammad Salim Almas, the head of Kabul's Criminal Investigation Department, because of what officials called a dramatic increase in crime. The rise is hard to quantify. The Interior Ministry this month said it had recorded 100,000 crimes over a 5-year period, but did not provide a breakdown. Abdul Khalik Zazai Watandost, a member of Kabul's provincial council, who helps monitor crime rates, said criminals have killed 70 people in the capital and its surrounding areas in the past 2 months, with dozens more locals kidnapped. Watandost said crime has become a bigger problem than terrorism for Kabul residents. Terrorism is a big phenomenon, but at least we would be able to control the crime. Aside from murder and kidnappings, car thefts are common, the narcotics trade is booming, and criminal gangs sometimes target foes by slapping sticky bombs under their cars. Shamsuddin, a shopkeeper who only wanted to give his first name, said when he goes into central Kabul to buy groceries, he splits his cash in 2. He said he gives some to his son and keeps some with himself. This is because if criminals find out you have a good amount of money on you, they will kill you and take your money. Residents are changing their routes to work while carrying guns, and keeping weapons at home are also common. NGO Avaz, which carries out cyber militancy activities, announced it has reported to the run-up to the European elections more than 500 Facebook pages and groups suspected of spreading false information within the EU.
platforms. But today, social media is polarizing us. And the platforms can change their policies to fix this problem. But without public pressure, without regulations and laws, they don't have no incentive to. And so we've been pushing them and working hard with them so that they fix this problem.
We looked in Spain, Italy, France, Germany, Poland, and the UK. And each time we found networks often consistent of a lot of fake accounts, coordinating with each other to send out fake news and disinformation and hateful speech to millions of people every single day. And we just want to show that there's so much going on out there and that people need to be aware.
Despite the warnings, the campaign for the European Parliament elections has yet to be marked by a flood of fake news. But it is still too early for the EU to declare victory over misinformation. Ever since the US presidential elections in 2016, which were marked by false information spread on social media aiming to manipulate the electorate, EU member states have been on their guard against fake news. In an unprecedented move in February, the heads of the German, British, and French foreign intelligence services issued a joint statement warning against foreign interference in elections in Europe. The EU polls that will run in member states from May 23 to May 26 will be a key test of whether new alert systems put in place since then have had any impact. A rapid alert system staffed by a dozen people has been set up in the EU's External Action Service to closely watch social media and warn of possible risk of interference. Tech giants, and especially Facebook, Google, and Twitter, have come under immense pressure from EU governments to react better and quicker to take down fake news spread through their sites. News media, including Agence France Presse, or AFP, have also sought to directly combat fake news by setting up fact-checking services which can explicitly contradict false information. If the EU elections do show an improvement, it is another question whether this is because the situation has improved or just a further sign of apathy for polls, where only 42.5% of the electorate voted last time around in 2014. A second European official said even if multiple examples of information manipulations had been reported, none of them was yet of a sufficient scale to justify launching a pan-European alert. Some examples also were sometimes not directly linked to the elections, but aimed at undermining confidence in institutions or inciting hate against immigrants, the official said. The countries targeted included the Baltic states, Romania, France, and Germany, with the misinformation originating in Russia and Iran. But none of these so far came into a category of being a clearly coordinated campaign seeking to influence the vote of a certain category of the electorate, said the official. Facebook has come under particularly heavy attack over the use of its platform in the 2016 American polls and has acknowledged more needs to be done. It has set up a regional center in Dublin to prevent the use of adverts sent from abroad that seek to target the electorate. Some Western governments have directly accused Russia of seeking to sway the results of elections by putting out false information on social media sites to influence voters towards a certain choice. The Kremlin strongly denies the allegations. Meanwhile, the presence in France ahead of the EU polls of U.S. President Donald Trump's former strategist Steve Bannon, the founder of the right-wing U.S. website Breitbart, has sparked tensions ahead of the polls. According to an International Labor Organization report published on Wednesday, companies that improve gender diversity, especially at the top, perform better and rake in higher profits, while countries that increase women employment see better economic growth.
If the board has a critical mass of women, so above 30%, the probability of the company having greater business outcomes is increased by 19%. When the board goes beyond from 40 to 60%, so more gender balance, that figure goes up to 20%. So you actually see that what happens at the very top leadership does trickle down. It does have an association and connection to business performance.
Less than a third of company boards globally have what's judged by studies to have the critical mass of 30% female participation for it to have a positive impact on the bottom line. And still globally, less than 20% of CEOs are women. We still have the glass walls. You're more likely to find senior women in occupations such as human resources directors, administrative management directors, and fewer in financial management, chief financial officers, or the strategic direction of the company.
Vice President of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans, gives a press conference with the president of the Polish Spring Party, Robert Biogen, where he talks in Warsaw about his experience as a victim of a pedophile priest and calls on the Catholic Church for no impunity for priests who sexually abuse children.
I have personal experience with this phenomenon, and as you know, many countries in the world in the last 15 years have gone through this process Poland is going through today. Forgiveness comes if there is an admission of guilt, if there is punishment for those who committed crimes. Then you can offer the possibility for the victims to then forgive. Because in my case, that happened like this. And the most liberating thing I experienced after many, many years was to be able to forgive. To my church, the Catholic Church. Make sure there is no impunity. Make sure that there is no impunity. Analyze the problem. Like other churches in other countries have done. Go to the bottom of it. If people engaged in criminal behavior, denounce them to the authorities so that they can be prosecuted.
Coming up, China is opposed to U.S. surveillance blacklist report. Pelosi and Schumer lament President Trump's refusal to work with Democrats on infrastructure deal. Trump holds impromptu news conference after walking out on Democrats. Stephen Mnuchin insists he is not violating the law by defying Congress' subpoena for Trump tax records. Eagle News, Washington, D.C. will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. You are watching Eagle News, Washington, D.C. China reiterates its opposition to the U.S.'s abuse of state power. In response to reports, Washington is considering banning certain Chinese surveillance firms, including Hangzhou Hikvision Digital Technology and Zhejiang Dahu Technology, from buying U.S. components.
最近我们已经一再表明过，中方对于美国滥用国家力量，肆意的抹黑和打压其他国家企业，包括中国企业，这样的一些做法，我们已经一再表明了我们的反对的立场。就中方而言，我们一向要求中国企业，在遵循市场规律和国际规则的基础上，在其他国家开展投资经营的活动。同时，我们也一直要求，其他国家能够给予中国企业公平、非歧视的待遇。我们没有这个想法。我们当然主张，就是我这2天一直强调的，国家间的贸易投资关系应当是坚持相互尊重、平等互利的。同时呢，我们也一直强调，中国对外开放的大门始终是打开的。我在这昨天就已经重申过，我们依然欢迎外资来华投资兴业，开展互利合作。我们也
Shares in 2 top Chinese surveillance firms plunged Wednesday following reports Washington is considering banning them from buying U.S. components, just as the blacklisting of telecoms giant Huawei fanned their escalating tech war. Bloomberg News cited people familiar with the matter as saying the move over alleged human rights abuses would make it harder for Hangzhou Hikvision Digital Technology and Zhejiang Dawa Technology to access the U.S. market and suppliers. The action, first reported by the New York Times, would also likely exacerbate a worsening row with Beijing after President Donald Trump stopped U.S. firms from selling to Huawei and barred it from the U.S. market. Huawei has been given a 90-day reprieve. Shenzhen-listed Hikvision dived 5.54% to 26.07 yuan, and Dahua tumbled 5.91% to 12.74 yuan Wednesday. Hikvision is the world's largest seller of surveillance equipment, employing 34,000 people worldwide. It has grown quickly as Beijing has expanded surveillance on its population and especially in its restive northwestern Xinjiang region. The Uyghur ethnic minority make up almost half of the region's 23 million strong population and have been targeted with pervasive surveillance from camera like those made by Hikvision, among other draconian security measures following a flare-up in violence in 2014. Chinese authorities have placed an estimated 1 million mostly Muslim ethnic minorities, including Uyghurs, in internment camps, which Chinese authorities call as vocational education centers. Last year, U.S. lawmakers wrote to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, calling for sanctions on Chinese officials in charge of the region and on the two surveillance equipment manufacturers supplying equipment, Hikvision and Dahua. Hikvision Board Secretary Wang Fanghong said, "We have taken note of the New York Times report this morning and hope our company receives fair and just treatment." Wang said on her WeChat social media account, Hikvision is a product supplier. "We have not done anything improper in Xinjiang. Our company has not in the past, does not right now, and will not in the future take any business that has violating human rights as a requirement." Asked about the reports, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Lu Kang told reporters, quote, "We have repeatedly stated China's opposition to the U.S. abuse of state power to willfully smear and suppress enterprises of other countries, including Chinese enterprises." Hikvision's controlling shareholder is state-owned China Electronics Technology HIK Group. Bloomberg News said as many as 5 Chinese surveillance hardware makers, including Hikvision and Dahua, could be added to the U.S. Commerce Department entity list. The Commerce Department action against Huawei threatens to bar the company from using Google's Android software for its smartphones, remove U.S. chips from its handset and telecoms gear, and could slow down the rollout of next-generation 5G networks in parts of the world. Top Democrats Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer lament President Trump's refusal to work with them on an infrastructure deal over a spat concerning Robert Mueller's Russia probe. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer insists that Trump's decision to walk out of a meeting with Democrats at the White House was pre-planned, while U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi suggests a lack of confidence on the president's part in dealing with the country's infrastructure problems.
Hopeful, optimistic, and seeing the necessity for a big infrastructure initiative for our country, we went in the spirit of bipartisanship to find common ground with the president on this. Maybe it was lack of confidence on his part that he really couldn't match the greatness of the challenge that we have. Wasn't really respectful of the Congress and the White House working together. He just took a pass.
We are interested in doing infrastructure. It's clear the president isn't. He is looking for every excuse. But now that he was forced to actually say how he'd pay for it, he had to run away. And he came up with this pre-planned excuse. And one final point, it's clear that this was not a spontaneous move on the president's part. It was planned.
President Donald Trump gathers journalists in the White House Rose Garden to announce that he cannot deal with Democrats as long as they mount phony investigations. His impromptu news conference came after abruptly shutting down a meeting on infrastructure with Democratic leaders at the White House.
They would have loved to have said we colluded. They would have loved it. These people were out to get us. The Republican Party, and President Trump. They were out to get us. This was a one-sided, horrible thing. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. We've been doing this since I've been president, and actually, the crime was committed on the other side. We'll see how that all turns out. And there was no collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign. That's it. But they want to make this a big deal. Whether or not they carry the big I word out, I can't imagine that, but they probably would. If someday a Democrat becomes president and you have a Republican House, they can impeach him for any reason, or her. Any reason. We can't allow that to happen. I respect the courts. I respect Congress. I respect right here where we're standing. But what they've done is abuse. This is investigation number 4 and the same thing. Probably 5. And it really started, I think, pretty much from the time we came down the escalator in Trump Tower.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin testifies before the House Financial Services Committee about rejecting a congressional subpoena for President Donald Trump's tax records. He says presidents are not required to release tax returns and that he has been advised he is not violating the law by refusing to turn them over.
Presidents are not required to, and the American public knew that he didn't release them before they voted for him.
Do you know what he's hiding? I mean, he doesn't want anybody to see him, certainly not Congress.
I don't think he's hiding anything, but
okay,
no.
So you don't know?
Correct. I don't know anything about his tax return. Right. I have been advised I am not violating the law. I never would have done anything that violated the law, and quite the contrary. I've been advised that had I turned them over, I would be violating the law.
All right, let me move on, sir.
The IRS independently, the chairman independently wrote a letter concurring with my position.
Yeah, can you give me a yes or no? Have you?
You repeat the question?
Have you told the IRS not to respond to the request?
Again, I just said the IRS independently wrote a letter concurring with my...
Okay, let me reclaim my time. Can you give me a yes or no? Do you know how many times President Trump has publicly offered to release his tax returns?
I do not.
Well, we should have something on the screen. He's personally offered to give us a glimpse of his tax returns at least 24 times.
When we come back, lessons learned on overseas voting are being addressed by the Philippine Consulate General in Honolulu. Eagle News, Washington, D.C. will return shortly. This is Eagle News, Washington, D.C. I'm Anna Clee. Eagle News correspondent Alfred Acenas visited the Philippine Consulate General in Honolulu to know more about the outcome on the Philippine midterm election in his part of the world. Here's the report.
Well, since midterm election po ito, yung turnout natin na hindi kasing taas kumpara sa presidential election. But we still did well for Honolulu, which has under its jurisdiction around 12,800 registered voters. We had a turnout of a little over 17%. So mahigit na 2,100 yun.
The votes may have been cast and counted and the winners announced. But the Philippine midterm elections, as far as the government is concerned, is far from over, as various agencies and offices, such as the Philippine Consulate General here in Honolulu, are now faced with the daunting task of reviewing procedures, drawing lessons learned, with the hopes of improving their services in the next election season.
Ang mga official po natin, we did media interviews to inform our kababayans about the election, the 2019 election, and remind them of what they need to do for our registered voters. And also dun sa mga website natin at sa websites ng ibang foreign service posts, andun din naman po lahat ng informasyon na kailangan malaman ng ating mga registered voters.
Deputy Consul General Escalona acknowledged the various challenges in reaching out to voters dispersed throughout the Hawaiian Islands and as far away as American Samoa.
Nako, dahil malayo sila at ang flight sa American Samoa, it's only once a week. Yun ang medyo challenging, ano? We tried to send out the ballots as soon as we could, but unfortunately, we got our ballots from COMELEC rather late towards the end of March. So, medyo huli rin ang pagpapadala natin sa ating mga registered voters. At marami rin pala tayong yung return to sender na mga balota, yung pinadala namin. According to the US Postal Service, either wrong address, no such number, or vacant. Kaya pinost po namin itong mga pangalan ng mga voters na ito, but unfortunately, we got a few response informing us of the correct or new addresses.
She also highlighted some suggestions from voters and even colleagues from the embassy in Washington, D.C. and other consulates.
Meron po tayo mga na-receive na suggestions. For example, dahil postal voting tayo dito sa Honolulu, some were saying that the return envelope should already be stamped so that they don't need to put stamps any longer. In fact, marami tayong mail na kulang ang stamps. Kaya medyo nagtagal sa post office. Kinuha pa namin doon at binayaran na rin namin. Pero ang suggestion po ng iba ay gawin na lang self-addressed return envelopes na may stamps na. Yes, among our colleagues, we were saying that we hope that next election, padala sa amin ng mas maaga ang mga balota at election paraphernalia. We also hope that we'll avoid yung pag-register na ang sinusulat ng mga address doon ay care of the Philippine Embassy or Philippine Consulate. Kasi marami rin po ito. I think we have more than 1,500 for Honolulu out of the 12,800 na care of the Philippine Consulate. So, konti rin po yung nagsabi sa amin kung ano yung kanilang address.
Ms. Escalona described the way forward in improving the overseas voting process, indicating a need for closer coordination and planning with the Commission on Elections, as well as allocating more time for voters to register and make an informed decision when casting their ballots.
Ang ginagawa po namin ngayon, our post and other posts in the US, we're consolidating our assessment of the 2019 overseas voting so that we will have recommendations for the next election. So ginagawa po namin yan, and hopefully, as I said, we begin the preparations earlier from the training of our personnel who are deputized by COMELEC to do the election functions, to the sending of ballots and paraphernalia. We would like to work with COMELEC on this, on how to further improve the process so that we'll have more time because, as you know, we all also have our regular functions here at the consulates.
Finally, the Deputy Consul General offered assurance to fellow citizens in Hawaii and American Samoa while making a personal request in preparation for the next election.
Yes, I would just like to assure our kababayans, especially our kababayans in Hawaii and American Samoa, that we did our very best to ensure that we sent out the ballots to you within the election period, and also that for the next round of elections, from the registration period until the actual election, please check our website and our social media accounts, because that is where we put all the important information from the list of registered voters to those whose mails were returned and those who need to inform us of their address because they listed the consulate as their address.
Reporting from Honolulu, Hawaii, I'm Alfred Asenas, 1 with 25.
Mahalo, Alfred. That is today's Eagle News, Washington, D.C. Join us tomorrow for stories that matter to you. Visit our websites at Eaglenews.PH and Eaglenewslive.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/EagleNewsPH. Thank you for watching. I'm Anna Kui, and I'm 1 with 25.